I had heard countless ghost stories in my career as a reporter, but nothing intrigued me more than the tale of the phantom train of Deadwood. It was said to appear once every 10 years, a spectral locomotive steaming through the old, abandoned railway tracks just outside the town, carrying the souls of those who had disappeared without a trace. The story had resurfaced recently in a local news article, piquing my curiosity and prompting me to leave the hustle and bustle of New York City for the quiet, eerie streets of Deadwood, South Dakota. I arrived in Deadwood on a crisp autumn afternoon. The town, nestled in the Black Hills, was quaint, but had an air of melancholy about it. The locals were friendly enough, though their eyes held a hint of suspicion when I mentioned the phantom train. My inquiries were often met with averted gazes and hushed whispers, but I was determined to uncover the truth. The first person I spoke to was an elderly man named Harold, who ran the local diner. Over a cup of steaming coffee, he reluctantly shared his knowledge of the legend.
The train appears like clockwork every 10 years, right on those old tracks,
he said, pointing out the window to the rusty railway that cut through the town.
It's been that way for as long as I can remember. Folks disappear, and then the train shows up. Ain't no coincidence.
Harold's words sent a chill down my spine, but I needed more than local lore. I needed evidence. I spent the next few days poring over old newspapers, visiting the town library, and interviewing anyone who would talk to me. I learned that the last appearance of the train was in 2012, and the next sighting was due any day now. Among the people I spoke with was Emily, a middle-aged woman whose brother, Sam, had vanished 10 years ago. She had been a teenager then, and the pain of his loss was still fresh in her eyes.
He was just gone,
she said, her voice breaking.
No trace, no clues, nothing. And then the train came. I saw it with my own eyes, glowing, ghostly. It was the last time I ever saw him.
Determined to see the train for myself, I decided to stay until the anticipated night. Emily agreed to accompany me, hoping for closure. As the date approached, an air of nervous anticipation settled over Deadwood. The locals were on edge, and some even left town temporarily, unwilling to face the eerie event. On the night of October 31st, Emily and I stood by the old railway tracks, the full moon casting an ethereal glow over the landscape. The air was cold and still, the silence only broken by the occasional rustle of leaves. Midnight was fast approaching, and the tension was palpable. As we waited in the dim light of the moon, the weight of what we were about to do settled heavily on our shoulders. Emily's face was a mask of determination, but her eyes betrayed the fear and hope that battled within her. We had packed everything we thought we might need: flashlights, old train schedules, and the ritual items carefully wrapped in cloth. The walk to the tracks had been silent, each of us lost in our thoughts. The path wound through the outskirts of Deadwood, leading us away from the safety of the town and into the heart of the wilderness. The rustle of leaves underfoot and the occasional hoot of an owl were the only sounds that accompanied us. Despite the chill in the air, I could feel the sweat on my palms, a physical manifestation of my anxiety. Halfway to the tracks, Emily broke the silence. "Do you really think this will work?" Her voice was a whisper, barely audible over the sound of our footsteps. "I hope so," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "We've done everything we can to prepare. We just have to trust that it's enough." Emily nodded, though her expression remained tense. "I can't lose him again," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "If this doesn't work..." "It will," I said, more forcefully than I intended. "We'll bring him back, Emily. I promise." When we reached the tracks, we found the spot we had chosen earlier, a place where the trees parted, giving us a clear view of the railway stretching out into the darkness. We set up our equipment, the flashlight beams cutting through the night, casting long shadows that danced eerily among the trees. As the minutes ticked by, the tension grew almost unbearable. Every creak of the forest, every gust of wind seemed amplified, setting our nerves on edge. Emily checked her watch for the 100th time, the anticipation etched deeply into her features. Midnight was fast approaching. As the clock struck 12, a low rumble echoed through the valley. The ground beneath our feet began to vibrate, and a cold wind whipped through the trees. Suddenly, the phantom train emerged from the darkness, its spectral form shimmering in the moonlight. The sight was both mesmerizing and terrifying. A ghostly locomotive, its windows glowing with an unearthly light. Emily clutched my arm, her eyes wide with fear and determination. "There!" she cried, pointing to one of the windows. "It's Sam!" I squinted through the dim light, and sure enough, I saw the pale, forlorn face of a young man staring back at us. He looked just like the photos Emily had shown me, her brother, lost to the phantom train a decade ago. Without thinking, I leaped onto the tracks, waving my arms frantically. The train slowed, its eerie whistle piercing the night. Emily followed, her eyes locked on her brother's ghostly form. As the train came to a halt, we approached the nearest door, our hearts pounding. To our surprise, the door creaked open, and we stepped inside. The interior of the train was a chilling contrast to its ghostly exterior. It looked like an ordinary, albeit old-fashioned passenger car. The seats were worn, and the air smelled faintly of mildew. But the passengers, dozens of them, were anything but ordinary. They were translucent, their faces etched with sorrow and confusion.
"Sam!"
Emily cried, rushing to her brother's side. He looked at her with a mix of recognition and disbelief.
Emily? How did you find me?
Before we could process what was happening, a figure emerged from the shadows at the far end of the car. It was a tall, gaunt man in a conductor's uniform, his eyes glowing with a sinister light.
You shouldn't be here.
He intoned, his voice echoing through the car.
This is not your place.
"We're taking Sam with us," I said, trying to muster as much authority as I could. "He doesn't belong here." The conductor's face twisted into a malevolent smile.
None of them belong here, but they're bound to the train now, just as you will be if you do not leave.
Fear gripped us, but Emily's resolve was unwavering.
"I'm not leaving without my brother."
The conductor raised his hand, and a cold wind swept through the car, making the ghostly passengers shiver.
Then you will stay forever,
he said, his voice like ice. But before he could act, Sam reached out and grabbed Emily's hand.
I've waited so long.
He whispered.
It's time to go home.
With a surge of determination, Emily pulled Sam towards the door. The conductor snarled and lunged at us, but I swung the flashlight at him, its beam cutting through his spectral form. He recoiled with a howl, giving us just enough time to escape. We stumbled off the train, the cold wind biting at our faces. The phantom train began to move again, its whistle echoing mournfully through the night. We watched as it disappeared into the darkness, its ghostly light fading away. For a moment, we stood in stunned silence, the weight of what had just happened settling over us. Then, with a cry of relief, Emily hugged Sam tightly. He was solid, real, and alive. The following days were a blur of emotions. The town was abuzz with the news of Sam's return, and I became a local hero of sorts, my articles about the phantom train drawing national attention. But as the excitement died down, I couldn't shake the feeling that our encounter with the train had left something unresolved. Emily and Sam tried to return to a normal life, but Sam was haunted by memories of his time on the train. He spoke of others who were still trapped, souls bound to the phantom train by some dark force. The conductor, he said, was not just a ghost, but a malevolent entity that fed on the despair of its passengers. Determined to uncover the full truth, I continued my research, delving into the history of Deadwood and its ghostly train. I discovered that the train had once been a real, operational locomotive that had derailed tragically over a century ago, killing dozens of passengers. The conductor, a man named Silas Blackwood, had been held responsible for the accident. I unearthed old newspaper clippings and historical records that painted a grim picture of Silas Blackwood's life. He was a respected but stern man, known for his meticulous adherence to railway safety. However, on that fateful night, something went horribly wrong. The brakes failed as the train hurtled down the tracks, and despite Silas's desperate attempts to stop it, disaster struck. Legend had it that in the chaos of the derailment, Silas Blackwood was blamed unjustly for the mechanical failure. His career ruined, his reputation tarnished, and his life shattered. Silas was consumed by grief and rage. With his dying breath, as the flames of the wreckage licked at his body, he cursed the town and the train that had betrayed him. It was said that he vowed to return from beyond the grave to exact vengeance on those who had wronged him. As the next 10-year cycle approached, I prepared for another encounter with the phantom train. This time, I was determined to end its reign of terror once and for all. With Emily and Sam by my side, we devised a plan to confront Silas Blackwood and break the curse that bound the train and its passengers. Emily had been haunted by the loss of her brother for years, and she threw herself into every aspect of our plan with fierce determination. Together, we revisited the sites where the train had been sighted, conducting rituals passed down through generations of locals who whispered about the train's haunting. We gathered artifacts and relics, each believed to hold a fragment of Silas Blackwood's restless spirit. Sam, having spent a decade in the ethereal realm of the phantom train, provided invaluable insights into its passengers and their plight. His memories were fragmented, often clouded by the otherworldly nature of his existence. Yet he recalled enough to guide us through the maze of despair that engulfed the ghostly passengers. The night of our confrontation with the phantom train arrived with an air of inevitability. We positioned ourselves at the spot where the train was expected to appear, armed with ancient talismans and modern gadgets alike. The moon hung low in the sky, casting long shadows that seemed to whisper secrets of the past. As midnight approached, a chill wind swept through the clearing, carrying with it the distant sound of a train whistle. The ground trembled slightly, and a faint glow appeared in the distance, growing brighter with each passing moment. The phantom train emerged from the darkness, its ghostly form shimmering with an otherworldly light. With hearts pounding, we faced Silas Blackwood himself. His spectral figure stood at the head of the train, eyes burning with centuries-old anger.
You dare return!
He thundered, his voice echoing through the night.
You cannot break what is bound by blood and betrayal.
But Emily stepped forward, her voice steady and resolute.
We seek to end the curse, Silas.
She called out, her words carrying a weight of determination that silenced even the restless wind.
Release the souls trapped aboard this train. Let them find peace.
Silas Blackwood regarded us with a mixture of disdain and curiosity.
You cannot understand the depths of my suffering,
he murmured, his voice softer now, laced with the sorrow of ages past.
But perhaps there is another way.
He extended a hand, and for a moment I feared he would strike us down with his spectral fury. Instead, he gestured towards the train, his form beginning to fade with each passing second. Free them, he whispered, his voice barely more than a whisper carried on the wind. With a collective breath, we approached the train. Emily led the way, her resolve unwavering as she touched the side of the car. The door swung open silently, revealing the ghostly passengers within. They looked at us with eyes filled with longing and sorrow, their forms flickering in and out of existence. One by one, we helped them disembark, guiding them towards the light that beckoned in the distance. Some hesitated, their fear of the unknown palpable even in their spectral forms. But with each step they took away from the train, their essence seemed to grow stronger, more tangible. As the last of the passengers vanished into the night, the phantom train began to fade, its spectral light dimming until only darkness remained. The wind died down, and the clearing fell silent once more, as if holding its breath in anticipation of what was to come. Emily turned to me, her eyes bright with tears and relief.
We did it,
she said, her voice trembling with emotion. Sam, we did it. Sam nodded, a ghost of a smile crossing his face.
Thank you.
He whispered, his voice barely audible over the rustling leaves.
I can finally rest.
And as the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, we stood together, exhausted but victorious.